My son used my name for $200,000 in loans, then changed his number. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in late October, sliding through my mail slot with the casual indifference of junk mail. I almost didn't open it. The envelope was thin, official-looking, stamped with a return address I didn't recognize, some collection agency in a state I'd never visited. My fingers trembled slightly as I tore it open, standing in the narrow hallway of my small rental house, the autumn light filtering weakly through the frosted glass of the front door. Final notice of default. Outstanding balance. $47,293.18. I read the words 3 times before they began to register. The coffee cup in my other hand grew cold against my palm. This had to be a mistake. I hadn't taken out any loans. I was 71 years old, living on a modest pension and Social Security, careful with every dollar. I clipped coupons. I shopped sales. I bought generic brands and waited for markdowns on meat. I hadn't borrowed money in 15 years, not since I'd finally paid off the last of Michael's college loans. But there it was, in stark black and white. My name, my Social Security number, my old address from 5 years ago, a personal loan, originated 3 years prior, never paid, not a single payment made, ever. Before we continue, please subscribe and hit that notification bell, and let us know where in the world you're watching from in the comments. Now, back to my story. My phone sat on the table in front of me, silent as it had been for weeks. The screen was cracked in one corner. I dropped it months ago and couldn't afford to replace it. I picked it up with shaking hands, scrolled through my contacts to my son's name, Michael, and pressed call. The automated voice was immediate, emotionless. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. I tried again. Same message. The mechanical voice, so flat and final. A third time, my fingers shaking now, my breath coming faster. Same result. That's when the cold understanding began to seep in, spreading through my chest like winter fog rolling off the ocean. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. This was planned. And Michael, my son, my only child, the boy I'd raised alone for 38 years, the baby I'd nursed at 3 in the morning while my feet ached from standing all day, had done this to me. And then he'd disappeared. I set the phone down carefully, as if it might shatter. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them together in my lap. The kitchen was very quiet. The refrigerator hummed. The old clock on the wall, a wedding gift from my brief marriage, one of the few things my ex-husband hadn't taken, ticked steadily. Outside, I could hear the distant sound of traffic, the neighborhood waking up to another ordinary Tuesday. But nothing was ordinary anymore. Everything had changed in the space between opening that envelope and hearing that automated message. I didn't cry. Not then. I'd learned long ago that tears were a luxury I couldn't afford, a waste of water and energy that solved nothing, fixed nothing, changed nothing. Crying was for people who had the time and safety to fall apart. I'd never had that luxury. Instead, I stood on legs that felt unsteady and walked to my small home office, really just a converted closet with a cheap desk and a folding chair, but it served its purpose. I kept my important papers there, organized in file folders I'd labeled carefully: medical, financial, taxes, insurance. Everything neat, everything accessible. The habit of a woman who'd learned early that chaos was expensive and organization was survival. I began pulling files, credit reports from last year, bank statements going back 6 months, tax documents, old bills. I spread them across the kitchen table in organized piles, my movements mechanical, precise, automatic. If there was one loan, there might be more. I knew this instinctively, the way you know when you've found one mouse there are probably others in the walls. And if Michael had used my name once, if he'd done this once, he might have done it before. He might have done it many times. I called the collection agency first. I was polite, calm, professional. The voice of a woman who'd spent decades dealing with insurance companies, billing departments, customer service lines. I asked questions. I took notes in my careful handwriting. I requested documentation. The representative on the other end, a young woman with a southern accent, was sympathetic but firm. Yes, the debt was in my name. Yes, it had been sent to collections after 18 months of non-payment. Yes, I would receive copies of the original loan documents. No, they couldn't just make it go away because I claimed I hadn't taken out the loan. "Ma'am, I understand this is stressful," she said, her voice professionally kind, "but we deal with these claims all the time. A lot of people take out loans and then say they didn't when it comes time to pay." "I'm not lying," I said quietly, "but I understand you have to follow your process. Please send me everything you have." I called the credit bureaus next, Equifax first, then TransUnion, then Experian. The hold music was different for each one, tinny versions of songs that had been popular when I was young. I waited patiently, listening to Muzak versions of Beatles songs, of Motown classics, of music from a time when the world had made more sense to me. By 4 o'clock, I had requested my full credit report from all 3 agencies, expedited delivery. By 5, I had documented everything in my spiral notebook, the kind with the black and white speckled cover that I bought from the dollar store. 3 for $1. I'd filled dozens of these notebooks over the years, tracking bills and expenses and the endless small details of a life lived on too little money. 7 loans, 7 different institutions. Some I'd heard of, national banks and online lenders. Others were obscure, predatory lending companies with names like Fast Cash Financial and Quick Fund Solutions. Total debt, 200 rupees at $847. $203,847, all in my name, all opened within the last 4 years. None of them paid, not once, not a single payment on any of them. I sat in the growing darkness of my kitchen, the papers illuminated only by the small lamp over the sink, a fixture I'd rewired myself because hiring an electrician would have cost $200. My reflection stared back at me from the window glass. A thin woman with silver hair pulled into a practical bun, wearing a cardigan I'd owned for a decade, the elbows carefully darned, the buttons replaced twice. I looked 71. I looked every one of my 71 years. I looked tired and old and defeated. But I wasn't defeated. Not yet. Not ever. Because as I sat there in the darkness, a memory surfaced. Michael at 23, sitting at this same table, holding my hand across the scarred oak surface. His hands had been soft, uncalloused, the hands of someone who'd never done manual labor. My hands had been rough, the knuckles swollen from arthritis, the nails kept short and practical. "Mom," he'd said, his voice so sincere, so full of concern. "I've been thinking about the future. About what happens if something happens to you. You're getting older. What if you get sick? What if you have an accident? I want to be able to take care of things for you. Will you sign a power of attorney, just in case?" I'd been 56 then, healthy, working, still capable. But he'd made it sound so reasonable, so responsible, so much like a good son thinking ahead. "You're so thoughtful," I'd said, squeezing his hand. "Of course I will. I trust you completely." He'd smiled. I remembered that smile so clearly now, sitting in the darkness. It had seemed warm, loving, the smile of a son who cared about his mother. Now I wondered if it had been something else entirely, the smile of a predator sizing up prey, the smile of someone who'd just gotten exactly what they wanted. That's when I understood. This had been planned for years. This wasn't opportunistic. This wasn't a desperate mistake. This was calculated, systematic, deliberate. Michael had positioned himself years in advance, obtained the legal authority he needed, and then methodically destroyed me for his own benefit. My son, the baby I'd held through colic, the toddler I'd walked to his first day of kindergarten, the teenager I'd stayed up with through homework crises, had looked at his mother and seen nothing but a resource to exploit. I felt something crack inside me then, not my heart. That would come later. What cracked was the last bit of hope I'd been carrying without even realizing it. The hope that there was some explanation, some misunderstanding, some way this could be anything other than what it was. It was fully dark now. I sat in my small kitchen, surrounded by evidence of my own destruction. and felt something I hadn't felt in decades, something I'd almost forgotten I was capable of. Anger. Pure, cold, crystalline anger. Not the hot, explosive kind that makes you yell and break things and say words you regret. Not the kind that burns itself out quickly, leaving only ash and embarrassment. This was different. Ice in my veins, steel in my spine, granite in my bones. This was the anger of a woman who'd given everything and received betrayal in return. This was the anger of someone who'd been invisible too long, dismissed too easily, underestimated completely. Michael thought I was just a weak old woman, an easy target, someone who'd take this lying down, maybe file a police report that would go nowhere, eventually just accept the debt and live with the consequences until I died, which, given my age and health and the stress he'd just added to my life, probably wouldn't be that long. He didn't know me at all, because I'd been poor before, I'd been struggling before, I'd faced impossible situations before. I'd been a single mother working 3 jobs to feed my child. I'd been a woman alone navigating a world designed for couples. I'd been young and frightened and desperate, and I'd survived it all through sheer determination and the refusal to quit, and I'd always found a way forward. Not by being loud or aggressive or demanding, not by making scenes or losing my temper, but by being smart, patient, methodical, and absolutely relentless. Michael had made a crucial mistake. He'd underestimated his mother. I stood up. I made a fresh pot of coffee, the cheap generic brand I bought in bulk because it was $4.99 for 2 pounds. I turned on all the lights in the house, dispelling the darkness. I got a fresh notebook and a handful of pens, and I began to plan his destruction. But first, let me take you back. Let me show you who Michael was before he became this stranger, this thief. Let me show you what I gave, what I sacrificed, what I believed I was building, because you need to understand the full scope of the betrayal. You need to understand what it means when someone takes everything you've given them and uses it as a weapon against you. Michael was born on a frigid January morning when I was 33 years old. I remember every detail of that day, the way the windows of the hospital room were frosted with ice, the way the radiator clanked and hissed, the way the nurse's shoes squeaked on the linoleum floor. He came into the world screaming, his face red and furious, his tiny fists clenched. "You've got a fighter here," the nurse said, placing him on my chest. I looked down at him, this small, angry, perfect creature, and felt something I'd never felt before. Not just love. I'd loved before, badly, which is how I'd ended up pregnant and alone. This was different. This was responsibility so enormous, it was almost crushing. This was the understanding that another human life depended entirely on me, on my choices, on my ability to provide and protect and nurture. His father, my husband of 11 months, left when Michael was 6 months old, not because of some dramatic betrayal or terrible fight. He just left, came home from work one day, packed a bag and said he couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't handle the crying, the diapers, the loss of freedom, the financial pressure, the whole thing. He was 26 and he wanted his life back. "I'm not cut out for this," he said, standing in the doorway of our tiny apartment with his duffel bag over his shoulder. "I'm sorry." And he was gone. No child support. He disappeared completely, moved to another state, changed jobs, became untraceable. I was 33 years old, alone with a 6-month-old baby, living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Queens, with $347 in my bank account and a job as a medical secretary that paid $24,000 a year. I remember sitting on the floor of that apartment after he left, Michael in my lap, the winter darkness pressing against the windows. I remember thinking, I can't do this. It's too much. I'm not strong enough. But then Michael had looked up at me with those wide, trusting eyes. He'd reached up with one small hand and grabbed my finger, and I'd thought, I don't have a choice. He needs me. So I'll figure it out. And I did. Somehow, impossibly, I did. I worked 40 hours a week at the medical office. I picked up a second job doing data entry from home in the evenings, Michael sleeping in his playpen next to my desk. On weekends, I cleaned houses, 3 different families, $50 a house, 4 hours of scrubbing toilets and mopping floors, while Michael napped in his car seat or played with toys in the corner. I slept 4, maybe 5 hours a night. I survived on coffee and determination. My body ached constantly, my back from lifting Michael, my feet from standing all day, my hands from typing and scrubbing and carrying. I developed tension headaches that lasted for days. I ground my teeth at night. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman 10 years older than her calendar age. But Michael had food. Michael had clothes. Michael had a warm, safe place to sleep. When Michael was 2, I started reading to him every night before bed. We didn't have many books. I couldn't afford them, but the library was free. We went every Saturday morning, Michael in his stroller, me pushing him the 8 blocks there and back. He'd pick out 5 books, the maximum allowed, and we'd read them over and over throughout the week. His favorite was about a caterpillar that ate too much. He'd make me read it 3 times every night, his small finger pointing to the pictures, his voice joining mine on the parts he'd memorized. But he was still hungry. I remember the weight of him in my arms at 2 in the morning when he woke from a nightmare, the way he'd curl against my chest, his breath slowing as he fell back asleep. I'd stand there, in the darkness of our small apartment, swaying slightly, my back screaming, my eyes burning with exhaustion, and whisper promises to him. I'll give you everything. I'll make sure you have chances I never had. You'll never know what it's like to go without. You'll have a good education. You'll have opportunities. You'll have a better life than mine. I promise. I promise. And I kept those promises. God help me. I kept every single one. When Michael was 6, I worked 3 jobs to move us to a better school district in New Jersey. The rent was $300 more per month, an impossible amount, but I found a way. I slept less. I worked more. I ate ramen and peanut butter sandwiches while making sure Michael had balanced meals with vegetables and protein. I wore the same winter coat for 8 years, the lining torn, the zipper broken, held together with safety pins. But Michael had a new coat every year because children grow, and I couldn't send him to school looking poor, looking different, looking like he didn't have a mother who cared. The new school was better. Smaller class sizes, more resources, teachers who actually remembered students' names. Michael thrived there. He made friends. He joined the soccer team, which required me to pay for cleats and shin guards and team fees. Money I didn't have but found anyway by taking on an extra house cleaning gig. I went to every game, every single one. Even the ones that started at 7 in the morning on Saturdays, when I'd worked until 11 the night before. I stood on the sidelines with the other parents, pretending I wasn't barely staying awake, cheering for my boy as he ran up and down the field. After the games, the other parents would go out for breakfast together, the kids bouncing with energy, still in their uniforms. They'd invite us along. Thanks, but we have plans, I'd say, smiling. Our plans were going home to eat the scrambled eggs and toast I could afford, Michael chattering about the game while I tried to stay conscious. He was bright, my boy, quick with numbers, curious about everything. He'd sit at our small kitchen counter doing homework while I made dinner, asking endless questions. Mom, why do stars burn? Because they're made of gases that create energy through fusion. What's fusion? It's when atoms combine to make bigger atoms, and that releases heat and light. But how do they combine? I'm not entirely sure, honey. Let me check at the library tomorrow and I'll tell you. And I would. I'd go to the library on my lunch break, look it up in the encyclopedia, and explain it to him that night. Because I wanted him to know that questions had answers, that knowledge was accessible, that curiosity was valuable. I encouraged every interest. When he mentioned liking chess, I found a used chess set at a garage sale for $2 and taught myself the rules so I could play with him. When he wanted to learn guitar, I saved for 6 months and bought a used guitar for $85. Then found free online lessons we could watch together on the library computer. When he was 10, he wanted to go to space camp. The cost was $875, an impossible sum, but he wanted it so badly, talked about it constantly, brought home brochures and taped them to his bedroom wall. I worked double shifts for 4 months. I skipped meals. I took on extra data entry work. I cleaned an additional house every weekend. I sold my wedding ring, the only jewelry I owned, for $150 at a pawn shop. I sent him to space camp. The thank you card he made me when he got back had a drawing of a rocket ship and said, "Best mom in the galaxy," in his 10-year-old handwriting. I kept that card in my wallet for years, the paper softening with wear, the crayon colors fading. I don't know where it is now. Probably I threw it away with everything else. But I remember it clearly, the crooked letters, the lopsided rocket, the stars he'd drawn in silver crayon. The teenage years were harder. Teenagers are expensive in ways I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just food, though Michael ate constantly, going through gallons of milk and boxes of cereal like they were nothing. It was everything else. Clothes that were suddenly crucial for fitting in, technology that was supposedly necessary for school, money for movies and fast food with friends, the constant grinding pressure to keep up with peers whose families had more, who didn't think twice about spending $60 on sneakers or $20 on a video game. Michael wanted name brands. He wanted the sneakers that all the other kids wore, the ones that cost $120. He wanted the phone that everyone else had. He wanted to not be the kid whose mom said no all the time, the kid whose clothes came from Target clearance racks, the kid who brought packed lunches because he couldn't afford the cafeteria. "Everyone else has one," he'd say, showing me advertisements for whatever the latest necessity was. "We can't afford it," I'd reply, hating the words, hating his disappointed face, hating being the barrier between him and the life he wanted. "You never let me have anything." "That's not true, Michael. You have plenty. I have the cheap version of everything. Do you know what it's like to be the poor kid? Do you know what they say about me?" I did know. I'd been that kid too, wearing my cousin's hand-me-downs, bringing terrible lunches, sitting out of activities I couldn't afford. I knew exactly what it was like. But knowing didn't give me money I didn't have. Still, I tried. God, I tried. When it really mattered, when he made the honor roll, when he got into advanced placement classes, when he was accepted into the National Honor Society, I found ways to reward him, to show him I saw his achievements. For his 16th birthday, he wanted a used car. His best friend had gotten one. Another kid in his class had gotten one. He was old enough to drive now, and having a car would mean freedom, independence, the ability to get a part-time job. I didn't have money for a car, but I took out a loan, $6,000, at 18% interest, because my credit was already stretched thin. I bought him a 15-year-old Honda Civic with 142,000 miles on it. It wasn't pretty. The paint was faded, the interior smelled like cigarettes, the radio didn't work, but it ran. Michael looked at it in our driveway, his face carefully neutral. "Thanks, Mom," he said. Not the enthusiasm I'd hoped for, not the joy, just a polite, measured thanks. But I told myself he was 16. He was self-conscious. He couldn't show too much emotion in front of his friends. I paid $167 a month for that car loan for 4 years. 4 years of budgeting and sacrificing and going without, so my son could have independence and opportunity. He totaled it 18 months later, drove it into a pole while texting, walked away without a scratch. I was grateful he was okay, of course. That was the important thing. But we still owed $3,800 on a car that no longer existed, and insurance didn't cover the full amount because the car was so old. I kept paying. What choice did I have? When Michael was 16, he wanted to join the robotics team at school. It sounded like a wonderful opportunity. Hands-on learning, teamwork, competition. I encouraged it enthusiastically. Then I found out about the costs. Team fees, materials, tools, uniforms, travel to competitions. The parent coordinator sent home a letter explaining that the team needed to raise $15,000 for the season. Each family was expected to contribute $500 minimum, plus additional funds for their students' travel expenses. $500. I didn't have $500. I barely had $50 after rent and utilities and groceries. I talked to the coordinator, a well-meaning woman who drove a BMW and wore designer sunglasses. "I'm so sorry," I said, "but I can't afford the contribution. Is there any way Michael could still participate?" "He's so excited about this." She looked uncomfortable. "Well, we do have some scholarship funds available for families in need. You'd have to fill out an application and provide documentation of your income. The shame of it. Having to prove I was poor enough to deserve help. Having to lay out my finances for strangers to judge, but I did it. For Michael, I did it. The scholarship covered half the fees. I paid the rest in installments, $25 a week for 10 weeks, money I should have been using for groceries or my own prescription medications, that I was now skipping every other day to make the bottle last longer. Junior year of high school. The robotics team qualified for nationals. The competition was in St. Louis. The cost was $850 per student. Travel, hotel, meals, registration. Michael came home with the information packet, his face glowing with excitement. "Mom, we made it. We're going to nationals. Coach says we have a real shot at placing." $850. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. I looked at his face, so full of hope and pride, and I couldn't tell him no. I couldn't be the reason he missed this opportunity. I couldn't be the reason his team was short a member. I couldn't be the mother who held her son back. I took out a personal loan, $5,000, enough for Michael's trip, plus a cushion for the inevitable other expenses that would come up. The interest rate was 19.5%. The payment was $160 per month for 36 months. I signed the papers with shaking hands, knowing it was financial suicide, but seeing no other choice. Michael went to nationals. His team placed third. He came home with a bronze medal in stories I heard secondhand from other parents because he barely talked to me about it. He was too busy posting photos on social media, soaking in the congratulations from friends. The medal went into a box in his closet. I never saw him look at it again, but I paid $167 a month for 3 years, $6,012 total, for a trip he barely remembered. College. That was the big dream, the ultimate goal, the reason for everything. Michael was smart enough for college, talented enough, hard-working enough. He deserved to go. He deserved the education I'd never had, the opportunities I'd never gotten. He applied to 12 schools, got into 8. Scholarships and financial aid covered about half the cost at the state university where he decided to go. The rest, roughly $15,000 per year for tuition, room, board, books, and expenses, fell to me. $60,000 over 4 years. $60,000 I didn't have. I took out Parent Plus loans. I maxed out credit cards. I took a second job as a night janitor at an office building, working from 11 at night until 7 in the morning, then going straight to my day job. I slept from 8 until 10 at night when I could, survived on coffee and adrenaline when I couldn't. I was 51 years old. My body was breaking down. I developed chronic back pain that never fully went away. I gained weight from stress and irregular eating. I stopped seeing the dentist, the eye doctor, the gynecologist. I couldn't afford the co-pays and the time off work, but Michael was in college. Michael was getting his education. Michael was building his future. The first year, he called home every week. We'd talk for 20 minutes, half an hour. He'd tell me about his classes, Computer Science 101, Business Fundamentals, English Composition. He'd tell me about his roommate, about the dining hall food, about studying in the library. "I'm working really hard, Mom," he'd say. "I want to make you proud." "I'm already proud of you," I'd reply. "You're doing it. You're making it happen." Sophomore year, the calls became less frequent, every 2 weeks maybe, then monthly. He was busy, he explained, lots of coursework. He joined a fraternity, which required additional fees I scraped together. He needed spending money, gas money, money for textbooks that were never covered by his bookstore budget. I sent it, every time. What was I supposed to say? Sorry, son. You can't have gas money to get to your internship. Sorry, you can't buy the textbook for your class? Junior year, the calls were mainly about money. He needed a new laptop. His old one had died. He needed interview clothes. He had career fairs coming up. His car needed repairs. He needed money for a study abroad application fee, for a security deposit on an off-campus apartment, for a class trip to a tech conference. Each request came with rational explanations. Each need sounded legitimate. Each amount seemed small in isolation, $200 here, $300 there. But they added up. God, they added up. I started using cash advances on credit cards to pay other credit cards. I started juggling which bills to pay each month and which ones could wait. I started eating one meal a day. I developed stress-related heart palpitations that I ignored because I couldn't afford to see a cardiologist. Senior year, Michael barely called at all, maybe once every 6 weeks. When he did, it was usually brief, distracted. Hey, Mom, just calling to check in. Yeah, everything's fine. Classes are good. Listen, I'm actually really busy right now. Can I call you back later? He never called back, but he still needed money. Those requests came via text now, brief and transactional. Mom need $400 for deposit on apartment after graduation. Mom car needs new tires, $500. Mom need money for graduation ceremony tickets and cap gown, $350. I sent it all, every dollar. I was down to $1,200 in savings, my entire emergency fund, the cushion that was supposed to protect me from disaster. But Michael needed it. Michael was almost done with school. Just a few more months and he'd graduate, get a good job, start supporting himself. Just a few more months of sacrifice. He graduated with honors in May 2010. I drove 6 hours in my 13-year-old Honda, the one I'd bought used for $4,500 after the last one died, to attend the ceremony. I stayed at a Motel 6 because it was the cheapest option. I ate fast food from the dollar menu. I wore the best dress I owned, purchased at a thrift store for $12, and shoes I'd had for 8 years. The graduation was held in a massive stadium. I sat in the nosebleed section so far away I could barely see the graduates as they walked across the stage. But I'd brought binoculars, a pair I'd bought at a garage sale for $3, and I watched through them as Michael received his diploma. My son. My beautiful, brilliant son. College graduate. Bachelor of Science in Business Administration with a minor in Information Technology. Dean's List. Honors program. Everything I'd worked for standing there in his cap and gown. I cried. Right there in the stadium, surrounded by thousands of other parents, I cried. From pride, yes, but also from exhaustion, from relief that this phase was finally over, from the hope that maybe now things would get easier. After the ceremony, I met him outside the stadium. He was with a group of friends, all of them laughing and taking photos. They looked so young, so full of potential, so unburdened by debt or worry or sacrifice. Mom, he hugged me briefly, distracted. Thanks for coming. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. He introduced me to his friends. This is my mom. They were polite. These beautiful young people in their graduation robes. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Harrison. Congratulations on your son's graduation. You must be so proud. I was proud, but I also felt invisible, standing there in my thrift store dress and old shoes while they radiated youth and possibility. I was just someone's mom. Unremarkable, easy to dismiss, easy to forget. So I'm going to go celebrate with everyone, Michael said, already moving away. There's this party at Brian's place. I'll call you later this week, okay? Okay, I love you. Yeah, love you too. Thanks for coming. And he was gone, absorbed into the crowd of graduates, into his new life. I drove home alone, 6 hours in my old car, listening to static-filled radio because the CD player was broken. I stopped at a rest area halfway through and ate the peanut butter sandwich I'd packed because I couldn't afford restaurant food. That was the last time I saw my son's face in person. May 15th, 2010, 14 years ago. I didn't know it then, but that brief hug in the stadium parking lot was the last time I'd ever touch my child. The next few years were a slow erosion of connection, so gradual I barely noticed it happening until it was almost complete. It was like watching a photograph fade in sunlight. One day it's vibrant, and then you look again months later and realize you can barely make out the details anymore. The colors have leached away so slowly, you didn't see it happening. Michael got a job at a tech startup in San Francisco. He called to tell me, his voice excited, talking fast. "Mom, it's perfect. It's exactly what I wanted. The salary is really good, $78,000 to start, plus benefits. I'm finally on my feet. I'm finally independent." I was so proud, so relieved. He'd done it. We'd done it. All the sacrifice, all the struggle. It had worked. He was launched. "That's wonderful, honey. I'm so happy for you." "Yeah, and Mom, thanks for everything, for college, for, making it all possible. I know it wasn't easy." "You're worth it," I said, tears in my eyes. "You've always been worth it." That was the warmest conversation we'd had in months. I hung up feeling lighter than I had in years. This was it. This was the payoff. Not that he'd take care of me financially. I'd never expected that. But that he'd be okay. That he'd be successful and happy. That's all I'd ever wanted. The calls became less frequent after that. Once a month became once every 2 months. He was busy, he explained when we did talk, learning his job, working long hours, making new friends, exploring San Francisco. I understood. I told him I understood. He was young. He was building his career. He was living his life. This was natural. This was healthy. This was what I'd wanted for him. But it hurt. Just a little. Just enough to notice. I was 52, 53, 54, still working both jobs, still paying off the mountain of debt I'd accumulated for his education. My savings account was empty, had been empty for years. I lived paycheck to paycheck, juggling bills, deciding which ones could wait another month. My body was failing in small, incremental ways. The back pain was constant now. I developed arthritis in my hands, making it hard to type, to clean, to do the physical tasks my jobs required. I had frequent migraines. My blood pressure was high. My cholesterol was elevated. I couldn't afford to properly treat any of it. I took over-the-counter pain medication and kept working. When I was 55, I had to quit my night janitorial job. My body simply couldn't handle it anymore. I'd started having dizzy spells, probably from lack of sleep and chronic stress. One night, I nearly fell off a ladder while changing light bulbs. My boss, a kind man in his 60s, pulled me aside. "Margaret, I'm worried about you. You're exhausted. You're not as steady as you used to be. I think you need to consider whether this job is sustainable." He was right. I knew he was right. But losing that income meant losing $1,400 a month. It meant I couldn't make the minimum payments on all my credit cards. It meant I'd have to start choosing between debt payments and necessities. I quit anyway, because the alternative was killing myself, and even I could see that. I called Michael to tell him, left a voicemail because he didn't answer. "Hey honey, it's Mom. Just wanted to let you know I had to quit one of my jobs. My health isn't great, but I'm okay, don't worry. Just wanted you to know. Love you." He texted back 2 days later. "Sorry to hear that, Mom. Hope you feel better." That was it. No call, no follow-up. Just a brief text with abbreviated words and no punctuation. When I was 56, Michael called me out of the blue on a Sunday afternoon. It was the first call in 3 months. My heart leaped when I saw his name on my phone. "Michael, hi, how are you?" "Hey, Mom, good. Listen, I wanted to talk to you about something." "Of course. What is it?" "I've been thinking, you're getting older, right? And what if something happens to you? What if you get sick or have an accident? I want to make sure I can take care of your affairs if needed. Pay your bills, handle things, make sure everything's taken care of." It sounded so responsible, so thoughtful, so mature. My son was thinking ahead, planning, showing that he cared. That's very sweet of you to think of. "So I was thinking you should sign a power of attorney, just in case. It's just a formality, but it would give me the legal authority to handle your finances if you can't. It's really common. Lots of people do it with their kids." I don't know much about these things. Is it complicated? Not at all. I'll email you the documents. You just need to sign them and get them notarized. There's probably a notary at your bank or the post office. Super simple. Okay, if you think it's a good idea. I do, Mom. I want to make sure you're protected. Protected. He wanted to protect me. My boy was taking care of me, thinking about me, being responsible. The documents arrived in my email the next day. 5 pages of legal language I didn't fully understand. Terms like durable power of attorney and authority to act in financial decisions. It seemed official and important, the kind of thing responsible families did. I printed them at the library, 10 cents per page. I read through them quickly, but honestly, most of it was incomprehensible legal jargon. I trusted that Michael knew what he was doing. He was smarter than me. He was educated. He'd explained it clearly. I went to the bank the next day. The notary was a pleasant woman in her 40s who barely glanced at the documents. Power of attorney for your son? Yes. Do you understand what you're signing? Yes. It lets him handle my finances if I'm unable to. Okay. Just sign here, here, and initial here. 3 signatures, 2 initials, 1 notary stamp, 5 minutes. That's all it took for me to sign away my identity. I mailed the documents back to Michael that afternoon. He texted me when they arrived. Got them. Thanks, Mom. I felt warm inside. My son cared about me. My son was looking out for me. Everything was going to be okay. That was 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I handed my son the weapon he'd used to destroy me. The year after I signed the power of attorney, things seemed almost normal. Michael called occasionally, every 6 or 8 weeks. The conversations were brief but pleasant. He'd tell me vague things about work, busy but good, about his apartment. It's nice, Mom, you'd like it. About San Francisco, beautiful city, really expensive though. I'd tell him about my life, my job, my health, the small details of existing. He'd listen politely, say, at the right moments, and then find a reason to end the call. Hey, Mom, I actually have to run, meeting some friends, but it was good talking to you. Okay, honey, I love you. Yeah, you too, bye. And that would be it for another 6 weeks. I tried not to be hurt by it. I told myself this was normal for adult children and aging parents. They grew up, they moved away, they built their own lives. The relationship changed. That was natural. I needed to adjust my expectations, accept the new reality. I started calling less frequently myself. I didn't want to be the needy mother, the burden, the one who demanded more attention than her successful son could give. I gave him space. I waited for him to reach out. Sometimes he did. Sometimes months would pass in silence. 2 years ago, I tried to visit him. I'd been saving up, $50 here, $20 there, hidden away in an envelope in my closet. By spring, I had enough for a plane ticket, budget airline, middle seat, layover in Phoenix, but it would get me to San Francisco. I called Michael to tell him I was coming. I thought I could visit for a few days. I'd love to see your apartment, meet your friends. Maybe we could have dinner together. I haven't seen you in so long. There was a long pause on the other end. Now's really not a good time, Mom. Oh, okay. When would be better? I'm flexible. I can come whenever. Work is just crazy right now. I'm traveling a lot for projects, and my apartment is really small. There's nowhere for you to stay. And honestly, I just don't have time to, entertain or whatever. Entertain. As if visiting his mother was a performance he'd have to put on. I wouldn't need entertaining. I'd just like to see you. Maybe later. Maybe in the fall or something. I'll let you know. Fall never came. He never let me know. The money I'd saved for the plane ticket eventually went to an emergency car repair. I stopped suggesting visits after that. Last year, I sent him a birthday card. A nice one, not from the dollar store. I spent $4.99 on it at Hallmark. It had a heartfelt message inside about how proud I was of him. How much I loved him, how I hoped he was happy. He didn't acknowledge it. No call, no text, nothing. For Christmas, I sent him a package. A sweater I'd found on clearance. Nice quality. his size as far as I remembered, some homemade cookies, a card with a $50 Visa gift card inside, money I truly couldn't afford but wanted to give him anyway. He texted 2 weeks later, "Got your package. Thanks." That was all. 4 words. For my 70th birthday, I received nothing from him. Not a card, not a text, not a phone call, nothing. I sat alone in my small apartment that day. I hadn't moved to the rental house yet, eating a store-bought cupcake with a candle I'd bought for myself. I sang "Happy Birthday" to myself in the silence, and I cried, not because I needed gifts or celebration, but because my son had forgotten me. Or worse, he'd remembered and chosen not to acknowledge it. That's when I started to understand that I'd lost my son somewhere along the way. Not to death. That would have been cleaner, more honest, something I could grieve properly. But to indifference, to whatever life he was living that had no room for me in it. I grieved quietly, privately, the way you grieve for something you can't quite name. I told myself it was okay. I'd done my job. I'd raised him to adulthood. He was successful, independent, making his way in the world. That was enough. That had to be enough. I told myself that parenting was about preparing your children to leave you, not to stay forever. I told myself I was being selfish, expecting more than he could give. I told myself a lot of lies to make the pain bearable. I didn't know that while I was grieving the loss of my son's love, he was systematically destroying my life. The credit reports arrived 3 days after that first collection letter. I sat at my kitchen table in the gray morning light, a cup of lukewarm tea beside me, and read through every single page. There were dozens of pages, credit inquiries, account histories, payment records, public records. My hands shook as I turned each page. The first loan appeared on page 4. The date originated caught my eye. August 2020. 4 years ago, right around the time I'd signed that power of attorney. The details were all there in small print. $25,000 personal loan from an online lender I'd never heard of. Application date, approval date, disbursement date. The information on the application showed my name, my social security number, my date of birth, my address, my old apartment address from before I'd moved. The income listed was $68,000 per year. I hadn't made $68,000 in my entire life, let alone annually. The loan had been approved for 10 years at 16.8% interest. Total amount to be repaid, $45,789. Number of payments made, 0. Current status, charged off, sent to collections. I documented everything in my notebook with trembling hands. Loan 1, $25,000. August 2020. Online lender, 0 payments. I turned the page. Loan 2 appeared on page 7. $30,000 from a different lender. Originated February 2021. Same pattern. My information, inflated income, full approval, immediate disbursement to an account I didn't recognize. 0 payments made. Loan 3, $18,500, June 2021. Loan 4, $22,000, October 2021. Loan 5, $35,000, March 2022. Loan 6, $28,700, August 2022. Loan 7, $24,647, January 2023. 7 loans, 7 different lenders, each one using my name, my social security number, my credit history. Each one approved because when they started, my credit had been good. Not great, but decent enough. I'd always paid my bills eventually, even if late sometimes. Michael had systematically gone through my credit limit, maxing it out loan by loan, each approval making the next slightly harder to get, requiring higher interest rates, more predatory lenders. The last loan, in January 2023, almost 2 years ago now, had been from a company I'd later learn was known for subprime lending, the kind of place that charges desperate people unconscionable rates because they have nowhere else to turn. 24.9% interest, fees for everything, application fees, processing fees, early payment penalties, even though no payments had been made. By the time that last loan was disbursed, my credit score had already been plummeting. The earlier loans were already in default. The inquiries and defaults were showing up on my report. making me look like a terrible risk. But somehow, this predatory lender had approved it anyway. Or maybe not somehow. Maybe Michael had used his power of attorney to provide additional documentation, to forge signatures, to guarantee repayment in ways I couldn't imagine. I calculated the math. Original principal, $183,847. With interest, fees, late penalties, and collection costs, the total debt now stood at $203,847. $200,000, more money than I'd earn in 10 years at my current income, an impossible, crushing, life-destroying amount of debt. I was 71 years old. I had $8,300 in savings, my entire net worth after 50 years of working. I owned a 13-year-old car worth maybe $3,000. My pension and Social Security combined to $1,147 per month. Even if I lived to be 90, unlikely given my health, even if I devoted every penny to debt repayment, I couldn't pay back even half of this. Michael had financially murdered me. There was no other way to put it. He'd looked at his mother and decided her remaining years, her financial security, her peace of mind were all worth sacrificing for $180,000 that he'd spent on what? What does a man in his 30s with a $78,000 salary need with $180,000 in stolen money? I spent the next week gathering documentation. I called every lender, every collection agency. I was polite, patient, methodical. I explained I was a victim of identity theft. I requested copies of the original loan applications, the approval letters, the disbursement records. Some agencies were immediately suspicious. "Ma'am, we hear this a lot. People take out loans and then claim they didn't when it's time to pay." "I understand," I said calmly. "I would think that too, but I'm asking you to send me the documentation so I can review it and file the appropriate reports. I have nothing to hide. The debt is still valid regardless. I understand that as well. Please just send me what I've requested." Most complied eventually. Some made it difficult, requiring multiple calls, requests in writing, reference numbers and case numbers, and endless hold music. I kept detailed notes. Date of call, time of call, person spoken to, reference number, what was promised, what was delivered. This is what women of my generation learned to do: document everything, keep records, be organized. Because no one takes you seriously if you can't prove your case, if you can't show receipts, if you can't demonstrate exactly what happened and when. The documents started arriving, large manila envelopes stuffed thick with papers, arriving almost daily. I organized them in folders, one for each loan. I highlighted key information. I made notes in margins. The loan applications were sophisticated. Whoever had filled them out, Michael, obviously, had known what they were doing. The information was consistent across applications, but varied enough to avoid obvious patterns. Different employment histories, different references, different phone numbers. But there were threads I could trace. On 3 applications, Michael had listed his own phone number as an emergency contact. On 2 others, he'd used an email address that, when I searched it, connected back to him through a domain registration record that was publicly available, and every single loan had been disbursed to the same account, a checking account at a large national bank, account number ending in 4739. According to the disbursement records, this account was titled in my name. But I'd never opened an account at that bank, never set foot in one of their branches, never received statements or debit cards or any communication from them, which meant Michael had opened it using his power of attorney. He'd created a bank account in my name, probably with forged signature documents, and used it as a funnel for all the stolen money. From there, the trail went cold. I couldn't access that account. Didn't have login credentials, didn't have account access, couldn't prove I was the account holder without identification and security answers I didn't have. But I had enough. I had enough to prove identity theft. I had enough to prove fraud. I had enough to destroy him. The question was whether I wanted to. I sat with that question for 3 days. I didn't sleep much. I'd lie in bed at night staring at the ceiling, turning it over and over in my mind. This was my son. My baby. The child I'd carried in my womb, nursed at my breast, raised from helplessness to adulthood. I'd loved him more than anything or anyone in my entire life. I'd sacrificed everything for him, my youth, my health, my financial security, any chance of my own happiness or partnership or ease. And he'd repaid that love by stealing from me, by using my trust as a weapon, by destroying me financially, and then disappearing, leaving me to face the consequences alone. If I reported him, he'd go to prison. Federal prison for years. His life would be destroyed, career gone, reputation ruined, marked as a felon forever. Even after release, he'd struggle to find employment, to rebuild, to have any kind of normal life. Could I do that to my own son? I thought about calling him, trying one more time to reach him, to give him a chance to explain, to make it right. Maybe there was some explanation I hadn't considered. Maybe this was all a terrible misunderstanding. But no, there was no misunderstanding. He'd changed his number specifically to avoid me. He'd planned this carefully, executed it methodically, and cut off contact to avoid consequences. He knew what he was doing. He'd always known. I thought about what my life would look like if I did nothing. I'd have to file bankruptcy. No choice there. I couldn't pay this debt. My credit would be destroyed for years. I'd struggle to rent housing, to get utilities connected, to do any of the normal things that required credit checks. I'd spend my remaining years, maybe 10, maybe 15 if I was unlucky, in poverty. Real poverty. The kind where you choose between medication and food, where you can't turn the heat on in winter, where every day is a calculation of survival. And Michael? He'd be fine. He'd keep his job, his apartment, his comfortable life. He'd probably do this to someone else eventually. Maybe a girlfriend, maybe a future spouse, maybe an elderly parent-in-law. Because that's what predators do. They find new victims. The third night, I made my decision. I didn't make it in anger, though the anger was there. I didn't make it in grief, though I was grieving. I made it in cold, clear clarity. Michael had made his choice when he stole from me. I was simply making mine. I wasn't going to be his victim. I wasn't going to absorb this destruction quietly. I wasn't going to let him win. I was going to fight back, and I was going to make sure he faced every single consequence of what he'd done. The next morning, I began building my case in earnest. This wasn't just about gathering documents anymore. This was about constructing an ironclad prosecution that would leave no room for doubt, no room for him to wiggle out, no room for mercy. I created a timeline. A massive spreadsheet documenting every loan, origination date, lender, amount, disbursement date, phone numbers used, email addresses used, cross-referenced with Michael's known contact information. I added columns for evidence, application copies, disbursement records, bank statements I'd subpoenaed through my identity theft claim. I researched federal statutes, identity theft, wire fraud, bank fraud. I learned that each loan could constitute separate charges, that using electronic means to commit fraud made it a federal crime, that the amount stolen, over $100,000, put Michael in a sentencing category that could mean 20 years in prison. 20 years. He was 38. He'd be 58 when he got out. An old man, a felon, with no career prospects and crushing restitution debt he'd never be able to pay. Good. I hired a private investigator. I'd found him through a victim advocacy group I'd contacted, a retired police detective who specialized in financial crimes. His consultation fee was $200. His investigation package was $1,000. I paid it, took the money from my savings, the emergency fund I'd been carefully protecting. This was an emergency. This was worth it. "What do you need?" he asked, a gruff man in his 60s with tired eyes and calloused hands. "Everything you can find on my son, where he lives, where he works, his financial situation, his lifestyle, social media, associates, everything." "You're filing charges?" "Yes." "Good. These family fraud cases, they're the worst. People think family means they can do anything. Give me 2 weeks." He called me back in 10 days. "Got everything you need?" Your son's living well. He sent me a detailed report. Michael's address, a luxury apartment building in San Francisco's Marina District, rent approximately $3,800 per month. His car, a leased BMW 3 Series, $689 per month. His employment, still at the tech company, now a senior developer with an estimated salary of $145,000. Social media showed a life of comfort. Photos at expensive restaurants, weekend trips to wine country, new electronics, designer clothes, concert tickets, sporting events. A lifestyle that would be difficult to maintain even on $145,000 in San Francisco, one of the most expensive cities in America, unless you had an extra $180,000 of stolen money to supplement your income. The investigator had also found something crucial. Michael was being considered for a promotion to engineering manager. The position required an extensive background check, including financial history and criminal record review. HR records, obtained through means the investigator didn't explain and I didn't ask about, showed the background check was scheduled to begin in 6 weeks. That was my window. That was my opportunity. If Michael was arrested before the background check, he'd lose the promotion. If he was arrested after, he'd probably keep his job initially, but the conviction would end his career eventually. But if I timed it right, if I could get the investigation started and evidence of financial irregularities flagged just as his background check began, I could destroy everything at once. Job, promotion, reputation, freedom, total annihilation. I felt no guilt planning this, only a cold, focused determination. I filed my police report first. Not with local police. They'd been useless, barely able to take down the information. I went to the FBI. Identity theft across state lines, wire fraud involving electronic banking systems, amounts exceeding $100,000. This was squarely in federal jurisdiction. I filled out the IC3 complaint form, Internet Crime Complaint Center. 40 pages of detailed information, every loan documented, every piece of evidence scanned and uploaded. I included the timeline, the spreadsheet, the bank records, the power of attorney documents, copies of the loan applications with Michael's contact information highlighted. I made it impossible for them to ignore. I also filed complaints with the Federal Trade Commission's Identity Theft Division, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and the California Attorney General's Office. Each agency got a complete package of evidence. Each complaint was meticulously documented. Then I waited. 3 weeks later, FBI Special Agent Morrison called me. Mrs. Harrison, this is Special Agent David Morrison with the FBI's San Francisco field office. I'm calling regarding your IC3 complaint about identity theft and wire fraud. My hands were shaking. Yes? Ma'am, I've reviewed your submission. This is one of the most thoroughly documented cases I've ever seen. You've essentially done half our work for us. I wanted to make sure it was clear. It's very clear. Your son opened fraudulent accounts using a power of attorney. He convinced you to sign. He applied for loans in your name, using false information, and diverted the proceeds to an account he controlled. He never made payments. And then he cut off contact with you to avoid detection. Is that accurate? Yes. We're going to open a formal investigation. I'll need you to come to our San Francisco office to give a sworn statement. Can you do that? San Francisco, the city where Michael lived, the city I'd wanted to visit 2 years ago, the visit he'd refused. Yes, when? How about next Tuesday? We'll fly you out, put you up in a hotel. This is important enough that we'll cover your expenses. They flew me out, business class. The first time I'd ever sat in anything but the cheapest seats. They put me in a hotel near the FBI building, a clean corporate place with thick towels and a breakfast buffet I couldn't eat because my stomach was tied in knots. The interview took 6 hours. Agent Morrison and his partner, a sharp-eyed woman named Agent Chen, went through everything, every loan, every document, every detail. Walk us through how he got you to sign the power of attorney, Agent Morrison said. I told them. The Sunday phone call, the concern in his voice, the way he'd made it sound responsible and caring. Did you read the document before signing? Yes, but I didn't understand all of it. It was legal language. I trusted him. He's my son. Agent Chen's expression softened slightly. Unfortunately, that's what makes these cases so devastating. The victim's trust is the weapon. They recorded everything, had me sign statement after statement, showed me photographs. Did I recognize these accounts, these signatures, these transactions? No. One more question, Agent Morrison said. Are you prepared for what comes next? Your son will be arrested. He'll be charged with multiple federal felonies. He's looking at significant prison time. Are you sure you want to proceed? I thought about Michael at 2 years old, his hand in mine. Michael at 10, showing me his chess trophies. Michael at graduation, his brief hug in the parking lot. Then I thought about the collection letters, the $203,000 debt, the changed phone number, the years of silence, the systematic betrayal. I'm sure, I said. Okay then, we'll move forward. We'll be in touch. Back home, I began the next phase. Anonymous tips. Michael's employer had a confidential ethics hotline. I'd found it on their website. I called from a payphone at a library 2 towns over, disguising my voice, keeping it brief. I have information about financial irregularities involving employee Michael Harrison. Employee ID. I gave the number the investigator had found, related to identity theft and fraud. You may want to review his background check carefully. That was it. 30 seconds. No details that could trace back to me. 3 days later, Michael's LinkedIn profile changed. The Open to Opportunities indicator was turned on. A small thing, but telling. A week after that, a tech industry gossip blog posted a blind item. Which SF tech company recently put a senior developer on administrative leave pending a financial ethics investigation? The dominoes were falling. 2 weeks later, Agent Morrison called. We've executed search warrants on your son's apartment and his bank accounts. We've seized his electronics, and we've placed him under arrest. He's been charged with 7 counts of wire fraud, 7 counts of aggravated identity theft, and multiple counts of bank fraud. What happens now? Arraignment is tomorrow. Bail hearing. Given the amount involved and the fact that he's already demonstrated a willingness to hide assets and contact information, we're recommending high bail. Will he make it? Probably not. He's got no real assets. Everything's leased or financed. His bank accounts show he's been living beyond his means even with his salary. He can't come up with $200,000 cash. Good. There's something else you should know. We found evidence of other fraudulent activity. Small stuff, credit cards and other people's names. That kind of thing. Your son's been doing this for a while. You're not his only victim. I wasn't surprised. Predators have patterns. They don't usually start big. They work up to it. Will those victims come forward? Probably. Once they hear he's been arrested, once they realize they can report it. We expect several more charges to be filed. Michael spent the night in jail. His bail was set at $200,000. He couldn't make it. The public defender assigned to his case asked for reduction. The judge refused. Mr. Harrison is accused of defrauding his elderly mother out of over $200,000. He changed his contact information to avoid detection. He poses a flight risk and a danger to the community. Bail stands. Michael went back to jail. I learned all this through Agent Morrison, who called regularly with updates. He seemed to understand that I needed to know, needed to track the progress of justice. 3 months later, Michael's attorney approached the prosecution with a plea deal. Michael would plead guilty to multiple counts, accept a sentence of 8 to 10 years, agree to full restitution, and waive his right to appeal. Agent Morrison called to ask if I had any input. Do you think he deserves more time? He asked. I think he deserves whatever the law says he deserves. I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in justice and consequences. 8 to 10 years is a significant sentence. He'll be in his late 40s when he gets out. He'll be a convicted felon. His career is over. He'll struggle to find employment. He'll owe hundreds of thousands in restitution. He'll probably never be able to pay. Yes. And you're okay with that? Agent Morrison, my son stole my identity and destroyed my financial life. He did it knowingly. Systematically, over years, he felt no remorse. He made no effort to make it right. He simply disappeared and left me to deal with the consequences. So yes, I'm okay with him facing the consequences of his choices. The plea was accepted. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 6 months later. In the meantime, my identity theft affidavits were working their way through the system. Each lender required separate documentation, separate proof, separate processes. It was exhausting, endless paperwork, constant phone calls, repeated explanations. But slowly, one by one, the loans were discharged from my credit report, removed, marked as fraudulent. No longer my responsibility. My credit score began to recover. From the low 400s, destroyed, worse than bankruptcy, slowly climbing back toward respectability. The collection calls stopped. The threatening letters ceased. The weight that had been crushing my chest for months began to lift. I filed for victim restitution through the federal court. Not that I expected to ever see the money. Michael would never be able to pay it. But it was important symbolically, an official recognition that I was the victim, he was the perpetrator, and he owed me. The sentencing hearing was on a cold morning in March, 6 months after his arrest. I took the bus to the federal courthouse, the same one where I'd given my statement. I wore my best clothes, the same outfit I'd worn to his graduation, still the best I owned. The courtroom was nearly empty. Just lawyers, a few court staff, a bored journalist covering the routine sentencing calendar. Michael was brought in wearing an orange jail uniform, his hands cuffed in front of him. He'd lost weight. His face was pale. His posture slumped. He looked small, defeated, broken. I sat in the back row, just another elderly woman in a courtroom full of proceedings. He never saw me, never looked into the gallery, just kept his eyes down as the judge spoke. The prosecutor read a summary of the crimes. The defense attorney gave a brief statement about Michael's remorse, his difficult situation, his potential for rehabilitation. Michael himself was given a chance to speak. He stood, his voice barely audible. I'm sorry for what I did. I made terrible choices. I let down the people who trusted me. I accept responsibility for my actions. Empty words, performative remorse designed to please the judge. The judge wasn't impressed. Mr. Harrison, you systematically defrauded your own mother, a woman who raised you alone, who sacrificed everything for your education and opportunities. You stole her identity, destroyed her credit, saddled her with debt she could never pay, and then changed your contact information to avoid accountability. This is one of the most callous cases of elder abuse I've seen in my years on this bench. The sentence, 8 years in federal prison, full restitution of $203,947, plus court costs and fees, 3 years supervised release after prison, permanent felony record. Michael was led away in handcuffs. I watched him go, this stranger wearing my son's face. I felt nothing, no triumph, no grief, no satisfaction, just a vast, echoing emptiness where my love for him used to live. I left the courthouse and took the bus home. Now, 4 years later, I'm 75 years old. Michael was released 6 months ago on early parole. I received formal notification, along with information about the no-contact order I'd requested and been granted. He's prohibited from contacting me in any way. No calls, no letters, no emails, no in-person visits, no contact through third parties. If he violates it, he goes back to prison. I don't know where he is now. Don't know if he's still in California or moved away. Don't know if he's working or struggling, housed or homeless. Don't care. He's a stranger to me. Has been for years. The son I loved died a long time ago. Maybe he never existed at all. Maybe I loved an illusion, a projection of who I wanted him to be, rather than who he was. My life now is small, quiet, peaceful. I live in this rental house, carefully managing my limited income. My health is declining, arthritis, high blood pressure, the chronic back pain that never goes away. I manage it with medication and stubbornness. I still take watercolor classes at the senior center. I've gotten quite good. I even sell pieces occasionally at local art shows. Nothing expensive, $25 to $50, but enough to feel like my work has value, like I'm creating something that matters to someone. I have friends now, real friends. Women my age who understand struggle and survival, who know what it's like to sacrifice for ungrateful children, to work their whole lives for nothing, to face old age with too little money and too many regrets. We don't talk about Michael. They know I'm childless. It's easier that way. Less complicated than explaining that I have a son who's also a felon who stole from me. Sometimes, late at night, I think about him. Not the man he became, but the boy he was. I grieve that boy. I grieve the relationship I thought we had, the future I imagined. I grieve my own naivety, my blindness, my willingness to sacrifice myself for someone who never valued the sacrifice. But I don't regret what I did, not for 1 second. Michael made his choices when he decided I was expendable, when he calculated that his comfort was worth more than my survival. When he looked at my trust and saw opportunity rather than love, I made mine when I picked up the phone and called the FBI. 1 phone call. That's all it took to end everything. His freedom, his career, his comfortable life built on my stolen identity. 1 phone call, backed by meticulous documentation, ironclad evidence, and absolute certainty. People have asked me, the friends who eventually learned the story, the victim services coordinators, even Agent Morrison, if I would do it differently if I could go back, if I'd give Michael a chance to explain, to make it right, to avoid prison. The answer is no, 1,000 times no. Because Michael didn't make 1 mistake. He made hundreds of deliberate choices over years. He chose to lie. He chose to steal. He chose to destroy me. He chose to disappear. And he chose to believe I'd be too weak or too loving to fight back. He was wrong about me. I was never weak. I was just kind. And when someone mistakes kindness for weakness, when they exploit love as opportunity, when they weaponize trust, they don't deserve a second chance. They don't deserve forgiveness. They don't deserve mercy. They deserve exactly what they get. Yesterday, I painted another watercolor. It's of my small kitchen, morning light streaming through the window, my coffee cup sitting on the scarred oak table that's been with me for 40 years. Simple, ordinary, mine. I signed it with just my initials in the corner, M.H. No need for more than that. It's not for anyone else. It's for me. A reminder that I'm still here, still creating, still living on my own terms. The painting sits on my easel now, drying in the afternoon light. Tomorrow I'll hang it above my desk, where I'll see it every day. My name is Margaret Harrison. I'm 75 years old. I raised a son who betrayed me. I spent 50 years sacrificing everything for a child who saw me only as a resource to exploit. And when he tried to destroy me, I fought back with every tool I had. I ended his theft with 1 phone call. I dismantled his life with documentation and determination. I demanded justice, and I got it. I sleep well at night. The house is quiet now, the way I like it. No collection calls, no threatening letters, no crushing fear every time I check the mail. Just peace, earned through survival, claimed through strength, protected by boundaries that will never be crossed again. I have my art. I have my friends. I have my small, simple life. And I have the knowledge that I fought back, that I refused to be a victim, that I chose myself. That's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. If you've experienced financial abuse from family members or identity theft by someone you trusted, you're not alone. You have the right to protect yourself, to demand justice, and to rebuild your life. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for defending yourself against those who exploit you, family or otherwise. Share your story in the comments if you're comfortable. Your voice matters. Your experience might help someone else find the courage to fight back. Remember, being family doesn't give anyone the right to destroy you. Subscribe for more stories of survival, empowerment, and justice. And never forget, you deserve peace, security, and a life free from those who would harm you.